Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? Many of you might recognize these well-known lines from the fairy tale Snow White. The evil queen looks into the magic mirror and asks, "Who is the most beautiful, the fairest in the land?" In this well-known fairy tale, beauty is the means for destruction based on envy. In art, however, beauty need not be feared. It is not an exclusive asset for only a few. We should take beauty in art seriously. Writing in ancient Greece, Plato taught that beauty was a quality that an object or thing possessed that compelled us to desire or admire the thing that possessed it. In this sense, beauty was not necessarily an aesthetic value, so how something looks, but rather how something fulfills its purpose, how well it can achieve the end it sets out to do. In art history, however, beauty is also understood in terms of aesthetics, so how something looks beautiful, and this can be thought about in an objective term. So by this, I'm thinking of mathematical concepts of harmony and symmetry, proportion. However, objective standards for art in beauty can sometimes be destructive because they are ideals. It can lead to the notion of perfection, the perfect symmetry, the perfect balance. And as illustrated with the story of Snow White at the beginning, this can be very destructive because we as humans inevitably fall short of these ideals. However, these ideals have been challenged throughout art history. So the Impressionist group of painters working in 19th century Paris decided to challenge the fine art standards championed by the Salon at that time, which was the official arbiter of taste in Paris. The Salon championed artists who used fine lines, tightly controlled representation, and easily recognizable stories. The Impressionists didn't like how rigid these rules were towards beauty, so they brought in a more abstract language of art. They went out into nature itself, rebelling against the highly worked studio paintings of the Salon. So the Impressionists went out into nature and they connected with nature at a deeper and a more immediate level. For the Impressionists, beauty was not a set of rules, but something that they felt, an immediate sensation that came from within. And this is important to consider because beauty, like I said, it doesn't need to be an exclusive asset. It is generous and it can ultimately bring people together. So I want you all now to think about beauty as a subjective relationship between the viewer and the work of art itself. This is how the German art historian Johann Joachim Winckelmann thought about beauty and thought about interpretation. Beauty was not an intrinsic feature, but something that arose from collaboration. An active participant in Winckelmann's relation was someone who was relying on their senses. And the 20th century American abstract painter Agnes Martin also developed this theme in her 1989 essay, Beauty is the Mystery of Life. She wrote, "When a beautiful rose dies, beauty does not really die because it is not really in the rose. Beauty is a state of mind, an awareness. It is a mental and emotional response that we make." So for a minute, I want you all to visualize a rose. The resultant image is likely not a textual one, so the letters R-O-S-E in your mind, but rather is it the blood red or ivory white petals, the velvet texture, or the spiky stem? This is an impression based on memory with all senses coming together. When I think about a rose, I think about the childhood walks that I used to take to school in the morning and seeing the scattered petals on the pavement below. I also think of a red rose encased in a glass dome from Beauty and the Beast. And lastly, I think about the dried, leftover red rose petals from an ex-boyfriend from Valentine's Day. In this sense, art is based on interpretation, and beauty arises from this relationship. If we return to these classical definitions of beauty at the beginning, we can think about beauty in terms of a fulfilling an ideal, but in terms of excellence, so how well something achieves its end. So perhaps the great artist is he or she who can capture an element of life so successfully that it unearths memories for the viewer, and they can feel this sensation of beauty again. This was something that the 20th century abstract sculptor Barbara Hepworth talked about. She talked about the possibility of projecting into sculptural form abstract visions of beauty, and her resultant oeuvre captures these moments of beauty. The rolling hills of Yorkshire from her childhood, combined with the more primitive landscape of Cornwall. These are all natural forms and feelings that when we, as a viewer, we can experience them, and it brings back those memories for ourselves as embedded in nature. What a beautiful rose. What beautiful petals. What a beautiful shade of red. Beauty, beauty, beauty. The word means everything, but also nothing at the same time. We all know what it means, but it fails miserably to convey what we mean. It is anticlimactic to the point of oxymoron. And this proves that it's based on this interpretation, this relationship that we cannot pin down completely, but it exists nevertheless. When I was talking about my personal memories of roses before, the beautiful memories, perhaps you had something similar when you thought about it. Maybe you also thought about Beauty and the Beast, for example, or you also thought about a gift from an ex on Valentine's Day. This suggests that beauty, that we can aim towards something. There is some kind of hierarchy, but something that we can't quite pin down. At these moments, we were brought together, me and you, strange other, a sense of harmony. So perhaps the ancients were right after all, the idea of maths and the feeling of coming together or being just right. The 18th century Scottish philosopher Adam Smith also theorized that beauty can bring people together in his theory of moral sentiments. He wrote that agreeableness attracts agreeableness. So in other words, beauty cultivates beauty. So whereas someone who's quite hateful or resentful might make you feel like you don't want to be in their company, I think we've all had those moments before, beauty or agreeable behavior attracts us to be in the company of someone who smiles. And he talked about this in architectural terms. So, for example, a prison fulfills its purpose as a prison because it looks disagreeable, so it tries to repulse us away from it. On the other hand, a regal palace looks beautiful. It's something to be admired and looked at. And this, for him, was vital in suggesting 1,000 agreeable ideas to the imagination of those who could see it or were in its company. However, some of you might argue that palaces themselves are exclusionary, so therefore perhaps beauty is also an exclusive term. True, unfortunately we can't all live in a palace, but Adam Smith was writing at a very different time, and he was very careful to distinguish between short-term consequences, so those that are restricted and immediate, and also long-term consequences, so those that are distant and more widespread. With this, he meant that immediate exclusion meant an improvement for the whole in the long term. So immediate exclusion was necessary for improvement for everyone. We live in a society today that prizes efficiency. Efficiency is a cardinal value. We want everything and we want it now. So we have fast food, cheap clothes made possible only through fast fashion, and we want short waiting times. Social media hooks us in with quick scrolling and quick videos. At the same time, we prize inclusivity and equality. We want everything, and we want it for everyone, but we want it now. Well, our society has improved drastically since the context that Adam Smith wrote in. We have improved healthcare, reduced infant mortality rates, improved access to clean water, and, relevant for this talk, our access to the arts has improved dramatically. From the end of the 19th century, public galleries and museums adorned the streets of towns and cities across the UK. Art is physically accessible, and what's different is that in the UK, many of these institutions are free to enter. We don't even need to go in the galleries, in fact. We can see public art on the street. Art has become so part of our cultural fabric that sometimes we forget that it's even there. Perhaps you walk past a sculpture every day on the way to work. So in this way, art is physically accessible, and it can bring us together in interpretation if we return to those earlier definitions of beauty at the beginning. It brings us together to think in common. We are brought into direct consciousness with fellow viewers through discussion, interpretation, and common cultural signals, and also through previous memories, previous versions of ourselves through memory evocation. And this is important because it makes us feel in common, and feeling is what makes us human. We as humans navigate life through feeling. If we experience pain, it warns us not to take the action again because it will lead to pain. But if we disconnect feeling from action, then this has dire consequences because we become less like humans and more like machines. And machines are capable of evil because they lack the capacity to care. This is why beauty in art is so important, because beauty can make us feel. It can reinvigorate the living within us and reignite that spark that makes us human. As I hope to have shown to you, beauty is not an exclusive asset possessed only by a few, but it is, in fact, something that we should take very seriously in art. At the moment, art is a dirty word in the universities and the art world as a whole, because it is associated with exclusivity, and this is especially current in the climate of postmodernist thought, which seeks to deconstruct our culture to see why certain hierarchies have been established. But beauty should not be contained in this category, because as I have shown, the hierarchies that we associate with beauty are superfluous. They are based on immediate experience. And the potential of using beauty to improve the world are many. So I'm going to quickly illustrate one of these possibilities in relation to environmentalism. In December last year, the famous sycamore gap tree was chopped down in Northumberland in the dead of night. For those who don't know, the sycamore gap tree was one of the most photographed trees in the UK, and it sat next to Hadrian's Wall. In the morning, when people had realized that it had been chopped down, national anger erupted, and people spoke about the beauty that was contained within this tree, and this was a beauty that resounded in nature, so the beauty that the Impressionists captured in their paintings, Barbara Hepworth in her sculptures. People, A, condemned the destroyers of beauty, and B, spoke of the need for nature and the loss of its beauty. But here's the trick. Nature does not need to be destroyed for us to talk about it and motivate us to preserve it. Beautiful art has a capacity to evoke these memories and evoke these sensations in our mind, to motivate us to preserve it, and also beautiful art can even reinvigorate the gut-wrenching sensation of lost beauty without the physical nature being destroyed. And by doing this, we can be motivated in common, bringing us together to preserve beauty. This technique has already been used in many different art forms. So, for example, the imagery used in the poem Binsey Poplars by Gerard Manley Hopkins. It opens as, my aspens dare, whose airy cage is quelled and quenched in leaves the leaping sun. All felled, are all felled. On a fresh and following folded rank, not spared, not one, that dandled a sandaled, shadow that swam or sank of a meadow and wind-wandering, weed-winding bank. Later on in this poem, Hopkins despairs that aftercomers cannot guess the beauty that has been when he describes these trees that have been felled, that have been so part of his DNA and growing up and seeing this beautiful forest. He despairs that aftercomers cannot see this beauty. Well, the good news is that we do not need to guess. Beautiful art can capture these moments of beauty and preserve it on canvas in sculptural forms without nature being destroyed to evoke this gut-wrenching sensation of lost beauty. Beauty in art gives us something to run towards. There is a place for artists to describe what to run away from, whether that's surreal fantasies, war, or social issues. But beauty plays a key role in improving the world because it creates a goal to run towards. So I'm going to leave you all with a question. What is the purpose of art? If the purpose of art is to reflect the destructive capacities of human beings, then art should not be beautiful. But if art is to improve the world and give an ideal that we can all run towards, but know that we'll be imperfect, but that's fine because we're humans too, then art should be beautiful. Desire for beauty is desire for life. Thank you.